The parking ticket wasn't even mine. But when I picked it up from the floorboard of my husband's car that rainy October evening, I had no idea that this crumpled piece of paper would reveal a secret so devastating it would either destroy me or set me free. Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Eleanor Hartford, and I'm 74 years old. What I'm about to share with you is a story I've held close to my heart for nearly 45 years, a story of betrayal, courage, and the unexpected friendship that rose from the ashes of my shattered marriage. Before I begin, I want you to know that this isn't just my story. It's a testament to every woman who's ever felt invisible, every person who's discovered that their life was built on lies, and everyone who's had to rebuild themselves from scratch. So settle in, grab a cup of tea, and let me take you back to 1973, when I was just 30 years old and my carefully constructed world came crashing down in the most unexpected way. It was October 1973, and I was living what everyone called the American dream. My husband, Richard, was a respected real estate developer in our Connecticut suburb. We had a beautiful colonial home with white shutters and a wraparound porch where I grew prize-winning roses that made our neighbors envious. Our twin daughters, Sarah and Jennifer, were 7 years old, bright, beautiful girls who filled our home with laughter and crayon drawings. I was the ideal wife of that era. Every morning, I woke at 5:30 to prepare Richard's breakfast, always 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I packed the girls' lunches with little love notes tucked inside. I volunteered at their school, hosted dinner parties that people talked about for weeks, and never, ever questioned my husband about his frequent business trips. "Eleanor, you're so lucky," my neighbor Patricia would say as we watched our children play in the backyard. "Richard is so successful, so devoted. You have the perfect marriage." I would smile and nod, pushing down the nagging feeling that something was missing. The way Richard would tense when the phone rang, how he'd started keeping his briefcase locked, the subtle cologne that wasn't his usual scent clinging to his shirts after those business trips. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Richard was a good provider. He never raised his voice. He attended every school play and parent-teacher conference. What more could I want? My mother had raised me with one core belief. A smart woman knows when to look away, Eleanor. Men will be men. As long as he comes home to you, that's what matters. So I looked away. I focused on my daughters, my garden, my volunteer work at the church. I became an expert at not seeing what was right in front of me. Until the parking ticket. It was October 14th, 1973, a date burned into my memory forever. Richard had called that morning to say he'd be working late again, the 3rd time that week. The girls and I had dinner without him, as we often did. After tucking Sarah and Jennifer into bed, I realized I'd left my reading glasses in Richard's car. He always parked in the driveway, keeping the garage for his newer Mercedes, which he used for business. His everyday car, a practical Ford sedan, was where family life happened. Soccer practices, grocery runs, the occasional weekend drive. I grabbed my coat and headed outside. The October rain was coming down steadily, creating rivers in our driveway. I opened the passenger door and clicked on the overhead light, searching the glove compartment for my glasses. That's when I saw it. Wedged between the seat and the center console, a crumpled parking receipt. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something made me pick it up and unfold it. The receipt was from a parking garage in Manhattan. The date was 2 weeks ago, the same day Richard said he was visiting a construction site in Boston. The timestamp showed he'd parked at 7 p.m. and left at 11:30 p.m. 4.5 hours in a parking garage in a city he wasn't supposed to be in. My hands started trembling. It probably was nothing. Maybe he had a last-minute meeting, maybe he'd mixed up his schedule. But then I noticed something else. A phone number written in blue ink at the bottom of the receipt, followed by the words, "Call me, S." I sat in that car for 20 minutes, rain drumming on the roof, staring at that receipt. Every instinct told me to tear it up, to forget I'd ever seen it. but my fingers were already pulling out the small notebook I kept in my purse, copying down that number. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Richard, listening to his steady breathing, wondering who S was. In the morning, I went through my routine like an automaton. Breakfast, school drop-off, grocery shopping. But my mind was elsewhere. At 10 a.m., after Richard left for work, I did something I never thought I'd do. I picked up the kitchen phone and dialed that number. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a woman's voice answered. "Hello?" She sounded young, breathless, as if she'd run to catch the phone. I froze, my prepared questions evaporating. "Hello? Is anyone there?" she asked again. I think I have the wrong number," I managed to say, and hung up quickly. I stood in my kitchen, heart pounding, trying to process what I'd just heard. That voice, young, confident, nothing like the mature women in our social circle. Who was she? Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own life. I started noticing patterns I'd ignored for months, maybe years. Richard's late nights at the office always fell on Tuesdays and Thursdays. His business trips always included a weekend. He'd recently opened a new bank account for business purposes that he never discussed with me. I began checking his pockets before doing laundry, something my mother always said a lady never did. And his gray suit jacket. I found a receipt from a jewelry store, $2,400 for a gold bracelet with sapphires. My birthstone is emerald. I've never owned anything with sapphires. In his briefcase, which he'd left unlocked one morning in his rush, I found a matchbook from a restaurant in Manhattan called La Petite Maison, an intimate French bistro I'd read about in a magazine, the kind of place for romantic dinners, not business meetings. Each discovery was like a paper cut, small, but accumulating into a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I needed help, but who could I tell? My mother would tell me to ignore it. My friends were all married to Richard's colleagues. Telling them would mean social suicide. I felt completely alone, drowning in suspicions, but lacking concrete proof. That's when I remembered my college roommate, Diana, who'd become a private investigator in Boston after her own messy divorce. We hadn't spoken in years, but I found her number in my old address book and called. "Eleanor Hartford?" she said, surprise evident in her voice. "My God, it's been what, 10 years?" 12, I corrected. "Diana, I need your help. I think my husband is having an affair, and I need to know the truth." There was a pause. "Are you sure you want to know? Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." "I'm already living in hell. At least the truth will tell me if I'm imagining things, or if my instincts are right." "Okay, tell me everything." Diana was thorough and discreet. She asked for Richard's schedule, his credit card statements, which I secretly copied from his office, photographs, and the phone number from the parking receipt. 2 weeks later, she called me back. "Eleanor, you need to sit down," she began. My legs gave out, and I sank into the kitchen chair. "Just tell me." Her name is Stephanie Caldwell. She's 24 years old, works as a secretary at a law firm in Manhattan. She's been seeing Richard for approximately 18 months. 18 months. A year and a half of lies. "There's more," Diana continued gently. "She's pregnant, 4 months along." The room spun. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Eleanor, are you there?" "Yes," I whispered. "Is there anything else?" "She's been paying for an apartment for her in Greenwich Village. From what I can tell, he's there every Tuesday and Thursday evening, and he spends most weekends there when he tells you he's on business trips." After I hung up, I sat at that kitchen table for 3 hours until it was time to pick up the girls from school. I functioned on autopilot, smiling at my daughters, helping with homework, preparing dinner. Inside, I was fragmenting into a million pieces. That night, I did something I never done before. I confronted Richard. "Who is Stephanie?" I asked as he loosened his tie, preparing for bed. He froze, his face going pale. "What are you talking about?" "Stephanie Caldwell, the 24-year-old secretary who's 4 months pregnant with your child." The color drained from his face completely. "Eleanor, I can explain." "I don't want explanations," I interrupted, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "I want the truth. How long?" He sank onto the edge of our bed. 18 months. It just happened. She understands me in ways you never could. She makes me feel young again. And the baby? I'm going to support it, of course. But Eleanor, this doesn't have to change anything between us. We can continue as we are. Nobody has to know. I stared at this man I'd shared a bed with for 11 years. This stranger wearing my husband's face. "Get out," I said quietly. "Eleanor, be reasonable. Get out of this house, now, or I will wake our daughters and let them watch me call the police." He left that night with a single suitcase. I didn't cry until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I collapsed on the bathroom floor and sobbed until there were no tears left. The next morning, I did what I should have done weeks ago. I called a lawyer. "Mrs. Hartford," Attorney Margaret Chen said, reviewing my notes, "I need you to understand something. Connecticut is not a no-fault divorce state. We'll need to prove adultery, and that means evidence." "I have evidence," I replied, sliding Diana's full report across her desk. "Is this enough?" Margaret's eyes widened as she read. "This is very thorough. Yes, this will help tremendously. Now, let's talk about what you want." What did I want? I'd spent so much energy just surviving that I hadn't thought about what came next. "I want full custody of my daughters. I want the house. I want enough financial support to ensure their future is secure. And I want him to know that betrayal has consequences." Margaret smiled grimly. "We can do that." The divorce proceedings were brutal. Richard fought me on everything: custody, property division, support payments. His lawyer painted me as a vindictive wife trying to punish a good man for one mistake. "One mistake," I snapped during a mediation session. "He maintained a separate apartment and a separate life for 18 months. He has a child on the way with another woman. Those aren't mistakes, they're choices." The breaking point came when Richard's lawyer suggested I'd driven him to infidelity by being cold and focused only on the children. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. "I was cold?" My voice shook with rage. "I woke before dawn every single day for 11 years to make his breakfast. I raised his children, managed his household, hosted his colleagues, and never once complained about being left alone night after night. I gave him the perfect life, and he threw it away for a woman young enough to be his daughter. Don't you dare suggest I'm responsible for his betrayal." The room fell silent. Even Richard's lawyer looked uncomfortable. Finally, Richard spoke. "She's right. Eleanor didn't do anything wrong. She never did." After that, negotiations went more smoothly. 6 months after I found that parking receipt, the divorce was finalized. I got the house, full custody of the girls, and generous support payments. Richard got weekend visitation and his freedom. I thought the story was over. I was ready to rebuild my life. Focus on my daughters, maybe eventually learn to trust again. Then, 3 months after the divorce was final, someone knocked on my door. It was late afternoon and the girls were at their grandmother's. I opened the door to find a young woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that couldn't quite hide her very pregnant belly. "Mrs. Hartford, I'm Stephanie Caldwell. Can I please come in? Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door. This was the woman who destroyed my marriage, the other woman, the enemy. But something in her eyes, fear, desperation, exhaustion, made me step aside. 5 minutes, I said coldly. She sat on the edge of my couch, hands clasped over her swollen stomach. I know you have every reason to hate me, and I don't blame you, but I need to tell you something, and I don't know who else to talk to. I'm not your friend or your confidant. Say what you came to say and leave. She took a shaky breath. Richard told me you were separated, that you'd fallen out of love years ago but stayed together for the children. He said the divorce was amicable, that you'd both moved on. He lied. I know that now. Tears spilled down her cheeks. When I told him I was pregnant, he was so happy. He promised we'd get married as soon as the divorce was final. He bought me an apartment, talked about our future together, our family. And now, I asked, though I could already guess. Now he says he can't marry me, that the divorce cost him too much money, that he needs to focus on his business and his daughters. He still visits, but he's already pulling away. I can feel it. Once his baby is born, he's going to leave me too, isn't he? I should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. But looking at this young woman, and she was so young, barely more than a girl, I just felt tired. Probably, I said honestly. Richard doesn't like complications. A new baby will be very complicated. I'm so scared, she whispered. I gave up my apartment, my job. I have nothing. My parents disowned me when they found out about the affair. I have no one. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, I asked, "What do you need?" I don't know. I wanted to apologize, to see the woman whose life I helped destroy, to tell you that I didn't know. I should have questioned his story, but I wanted so badly to believe him. You were 23 years old, I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. He was the adult. He made the choices. He lied to both of us. I should go, she said, struggling to stand with her pregnant belly. I watched her move toward the door, and something inside me shifted. Maybe it was remembering how alone I had felt during my own pregnancies. Maybe it was thinking about this baby, my daughter's half-sibling, being born into chaos and resentment. Maybe I was just tired of being angry. "Stephanie," I called out, "when is the baby due?" 3 weeks. It's a boy. Do you have a place to stay? Someone to help you? She shook her head, fresh tears flowing. Richard paid for 3 more months at the apartment, but after that, stay, I heard myself say, hardly believing my own words. Why would you do that? Because somebody should break this cycle of hurt and betrayal. And that baby didn't ask for any of this. That's how Stephanie Caldwell moved into my guest room in February 1974, 8 months after I'd found the parking receipt that changed everything. My friends thought I'd lost my mind. "Eleanor, she's the woman who destroyed your marriage," Patricia exclaimed when she found out. "Richard destroyed my marriage," I corrected. "Stephanie was just the weapon he used." My daughters were confused at first. "Why is Daddy's friend living with us?" Jennifer asked. I'd prepared for this question. "Because she's going to have a baby, and babies need help. We're going to be helpers." Children adapt faster than adults. Within a week, Sarah and Jennifer were excitedly discussing the baby, helping me prepare the guest room nursery, drawing pictures to hang on the walls. Stephanie was quiet those first few days, moving through the house like a ghost, barely eating, clearly waiting for me to change my mind and throw her out. "You need to eat," I told her one morning, setting a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. "That baby needs nutrition." "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked, tears threatening again. She cried a lot in those days. Because someone was kind to me when I needed it, I replied, thinking of Diana, of Margaret Chen, of the few friends who'd stood by me during the divorce, and because we're more alike than either of us wants to admit. How are we alike? You're strong, independent. You have this beautiful home, your daughters, your life figured out. I laughed bitterly. 6 months ago, I was a terrified housewife who'd never balanced a checkbook or paid a bill. I didn't know how to do anything except be Richard's wife. I'm learning, Stephanie. Every single day, I'm learning. That conversation opened a floodgate. Over the following weeks, as her due date approached, Stephanie and I talked for hours. She told me about her childhood in rural Pennsylvania, her dreams of living in the city, how sophisticated and worldly Richard had seemed when they met at a business luncheon where she was serving coffee. He made me feel special, like I was the most fascinating person in the world. No one had ever looked at me that way before. He made me feel that way too. In the beginning, he had this gift for making you feel like you were the center of his universe, until you weren't. When did it change for you? She asked. I thought about it. Gradually. After the girls were born, I became less of a wife and more of a function. The woman who managed his household, raised his children, maintained his social standing. I don't think he saw me as a person anymore, just a role. Did you love him? I thought I did. Maybe I loved who I thought he was. Or maybe I just loved the security, the certainty of knowing my place in the world. I paused. Do you love him? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if I ever did. I think I loved the fantasy he sold me. The exciting older man who would rescue me from my boring life. But the real Richard? She shook her head. He's charming and generous when things go his way, but the moment there's a problem, he disappears, just like he's doing now. 3 weeks later, at 2 a.m. on a cold March morning, Stephanie woke me. Eleanor, she said from my doorway, doubled over, I think it's time. I drove her to the hospital, holding her hand through contractions, breathing with her like I remembered from my own labors. At 8:47 a.m., baby Thomas was born, a healthy 7-pound boy with Richard's nose and Stephanie's dark hair. Do you want me to call Richard? I asked as she held her son for the first time. She looked at Thomas, then at me. Not yet. For right now, I just want this to be ours. Is that crazy? No, it's perfect. Stephanie and Thomas stayed in my guest room. What was supposed to be temporary became weeks, then months. Richard visited occasionally, bringing expensive gifts but never staying long, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. This is weird, Eleanor. My ex-wife and my Stephanie living together? What will people think? I stopped caring what people think the day you walked out, I replied. But if it bothers you so much, you're welcome to take responsibility for your son yourself. He left shortly after that, and his visits became less and less frequent. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening. Stephanie and I were becoming friends. Real friends, not just two women thrown together by circumstance. She was wonderful with Sarah and Jennifer, playing games with them, helping with homework, braiding their hair while I prepared dinner. They adored baby Thomas, fighting over who got to hold him, singing him lullabies. We're like a weird little family, Jennifer observed one evening as we all sat in the living room. Me sewing, Stephanie feeding Thomas, the girls doing a puzzle together. She was right. We were weird, unconventional, probably breaking every social rule in the book, but we were also happy in a way I hadn't been in years. One night, after the children were all asleep, Stephanie and I sat in the kitchen over tea. I need to figure out my life, she said. I can't live in your guest room forever. It's not fair to you. What do you want to do? Before Richard, I wanted to be a teacher. I was taking night classes for my certification. Huh, seems like a lifetime ago. So finish your certification. There's a community college 20 minutes from here. I can watch Thomas while you're in class. Eleanor, you couldn't ask. You're not asking. I'm offering.
What else am I going to do with my time?
That's how it started. Stephanie enrolled in classes that fall. I watched Thomas during the day, along with my girls after school. In the evenings, Stephanie would study while I worked on a hobby I'd recently developed, sewing clothes for the girls. "These are beautiful," she said one night, examining a dress I'd made for Sarah. "You could sell these." "Don't be silly. It's just a hobby." "I'm serious. My professor's wife owns a boutique in town. She's always looking for unique children's clothes. Let me show her your work." Within a month, I had my first order, 5 dresses for a boutique in Hartford. The pay wasn't much, but the thrill of creating something with my own hands, of being valued for my skill rather than my role as someone's wife, was intoxicating. As my sewing business grew, Stephanie finished her teaching certification and got a job at the local elementary school, the same school Sarah and Jennifer attended. The money wasn't great, but combined with my sewing income and the child support from Richard, we were doing okay. Better than okay, actually. We were thriving. "We should make this official," I suggested one evening in 1975, 2 years after Stephanie had knocked on my door. "Be actual roommates, split the bills, share responsibilities." "Are you sure? People already talk." "Let them talk. I'm building a life here, Stephanie, a real life, not a performance for other people's approval. And you're part of that life now. You and Thomas." She smiled, tears in her eyes, happy tears this time. "I'd like that." It was 1978 when everything shifted again. Thomas was 4 years old, a bright, energetic boy who called me Aunt Ellie. The girls were 12 and treating him like their favorite toy. My sewing had evolved into a small business with 3 employees working out of our converted garage. Stephanie was teaching 4th grade and had recently been nominated for Teacher of the Year. Life was good, complicated and unconventional, but good. Then Richard showed up unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. "I need to talk to both of you," he said, looking older and tired. He was only 42, but he looked closer to 50. We sat in the living room, me, Stephanie, and Richard. The children were at my mother's house for the weekend. "I'm getting married," he announced, "to Patricia." It took me a moment to process. "Patricia? My neighbor Patricia?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "We've been seeing each other for about 6 months. She's divorcing Tom. We wanted to tell you before you heard it from someone else." I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all. My ex-husband marrying my former best friend? "Congratulations," I said, and meant it. "I hope you'll be very happy together." Stephanie was quieter. "What about Thomas?" "I want to be more involved in his life. Now that I'm settling down again, getting married, I want him to know his father. Maybe have him stay with us on weekends." "Thomas doesn't know you. You visited maybe 10 times in 4 years. You can't just suddenly decide to be a father when it's convenient for you." "He's my son." "No," I interrupted. "He's the child you abandoned. There's a difference." The argument went on for over an hour. Finally, we agreed that Richard could start visiting more regularly, build a relationship with Thomas gradually, but Thomas would stay with us in the only home he'd ever known, with the only mother he'd ever known. After Richard left, Stephanie and I sat in silence. "Are you okay?" she asked finally. Weirdly, yes. I realized something while he was talking. I don't feel anything for him anymore. No anger, no hurt, not even satisfaction at his awkwardness. He's just someone I used to know. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "Isn't that strange? He was the center of both our worlds once, and now he's just peripheral." "It's not strange," I replied. "It means we've healed." That night, I wrote a letter to my younger self. the terrified woman who'd found a parking receipt 5 years ago and felt her world collapsing. Dear Eleanor, right now you're sitting in Richard's car in the rain, holding a crumpled receipt and feeling your life shatter. You think this is the end of everything, but I'm writing to you from 5 years in the future, and I need you to know something. This is not the end. This is the beginning. The discovery you just made will hurt. It will hurt more than you can imagine. There will be nights when you cry until you have no tears left, days when you don't think you can face another moment, times when you'll question everything about yourself. But you will survive. More than that, you will thrive. You're going to discover strength you never knew you had. You're going to build a business from nothing. You're going to learn that you're not just Richard's wife, you're Eleanor, and Eleanor is enough. And here's the most surprising part. You're going to forgive, not because he deserves it, but because you deserve peace. You're going to extend kindness to someone who hurt you, and that kindness will transform both your lives. You're going to build a family that looks nothing like what you imagined, but is more real and more loving than the one you had. 5 years from now, you'll look at your life and feel grateful. Grateful for that parking receipt. Grateful for the pain that forced you to change. Grateful for every difficult moment that led you here. So hold on, Eleanor. The storm is brutal, but what comes after is beautiful beyond measure. Love, your future self. I folded the letter and put it in my journal, a reminder that endings are often disguised beginnings. The years rolled on. Sarah and Jennifer graduated from high school, both earning scholarships to good universities. Thomas grew into a thoughtful, kind teenager who excelled in school and played soccer with passionate dedication. My sewing business expanded into a full boutique. Stephanie became principal of the elementary school. We bought a larger house together in 1985, a rambling Victorian with enough room for everyone and a beautiful studio for my work. People in town eventually stopped gossiping about us. We became those women who lived together, a little odd, but respected members of the community. Some probably assumed we were more than roommates, and we learned not to care about assumptions. Richard and Patricia divorced after 5 years. He moved to Florida and remarried again. His visits with Thomas continued sporadically until Thomas was 15 and told him point blank that he didn't need a part-time father. "I have 2 moms," Thomas said. "That's more than enough." In 1990, at age 47, I met someone. His name was Daniel, a widower who owned the hardware store downtown. He was kind, patient, and not intimidated by my unconventional living situation. "So you live with your ex-husband's former mistress and co-parent her son while running a business together," he said on our first date. "Most interesting thing I've heard all week." We dated for 2 years before marrying in a small ceremony in my backyard. Daniel moved into our house, fitting seamlessly into our unusual family dynamic. Stephanie never remarried. She said, "I don't need a man to be complete. I have my son, my career, my family. What more could I want?" Today, at 74, I look back on that rainy October night in 1973 with something close to gratitude. That parking receipt, which seemed like the worst discovery of my life, was actually a gift. It freed me from a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. It forced me to discover who I was beyond being someone's wife. It brought Stephanie and Thomas into my life, expanding my definition of family in ways I never could have imagined. Sarah is a lawyer now, fighting for women's rights. Jennifer is a teacher, working alongside Stephanie at the same school. Thomas runs a nonprofit that helps single mothers. Daniel and I recently celebrated our 28th anniversary. Stephanie and I still live together, along with Daniel, who jokes that he married into a cult.
We're planning Thomas's wedding this summer. His fiancée loves our story, finds it inspiring that two women who should have been enemies became best friends. "How did you do it?" she asked me once. "How did you forgive?" I realized that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting Richard to die. Forgiving Stephanie wasn't about saying what she did was okay. It was about refusing to let the worst thing that happened to me define the rest of my life. Last week, I found that old letter I'd written to my younger self. Reading it made me cry. Not from sadness, but from pride. Pride in the woman I became, in the choices I made, in the family I built from the ruins of my marriage. If I could go back to that night, standing in the rain, holding that crumpled parking receipt, I wouldn't change a thing. Because that receipt didn't just reveal my husband's betrayal, it revealed my own strength, my capacity for forgiveness, my ability to create something beautiful from something broken. Life rarely turns out the way we plan. The ending we fear often becomes the beginning we needed. And sometimes the people who hurt us lead us to the people who heal us. So I want to ask you something. What's your parking receipt? What discovery, what moment, what crisis revealed that your life needed to change? And more importantly, what did you build from those ashes? Because here's what I've learned in my 74 years. We all have a choice when life breaks us. We can stay broken, pointing to our wounds and saying, "Look what they did to me." Or we can gather up those broken pieces and create something new, something stronger, something authentically ours. The woman who found that parking receipt was terrified, dependent, lost. The woman I am today is none of those things. And the journey between then and now, painful as it was, made me who I am. Your story might be different from mine. Your pain might look different, but the potential for transformation is the same. You are stronger than you know. You are capable of more than you imagine, and your ending might just be the beginning you've been waiting for.
Now, before you close this video, I need you to do something for me. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own journey, if it gave you hope that transformation is possible, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now. Not for me, though I love sharing these stories with you, but for yourself. Because subscribing is like planting a flag that says, "I believe in second chances. I believe in transformation. I believe that endings can become beginnings." And while you're at it, tap that like button, because every like is a message to someone else out there who needs to hear that they can survive betrayal, they can rebuild, they can thrive. Your like might be the reason this story reaches someone who desperately needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me, what's the unexpected blessing that came from your biggest challenge? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire me just as much as I hope mine inspire you. Finally, share this with one person who needs to hear it. Just one. Maybe it's someone going through a divorce. Maybe it's someone who feels trapped in their life. Maybe it's someone who needs to believe that change is possible. You know who needs this. Send it to them. Remember, my beautiful souls, the parking receipt that destroyed my marriage saved my life. Your crisis might be your salvation too. Until next time, this is Eleanor Hartford reminding you that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living so well that the past becomes irrelevant. Now go smash those buttons like your future self is depending on it, because she is. There's something I haven't told you yet. Something that happened just last month that brought everything full circle in the most unexpected way. I was cleaning out the attic. You know how it is. 74 years of life accumulates a lot of memories in boxes. Daniel was helping me, complaining good-naturedly about my inability to throw anything away, when he pulled out an old shoebox from 1973. "What's this?" he asked, wiping off the dust. Inside were letters.
dozens of them. Some I'd written but never sent, some I'd received and saved. But at the bottom of the box was an envelope I didn't recognize, yellowed with age, with my name written in handwriting I knew instantly. Richard's handwriting. "When did this get here?" I asked, genuinely confused. Daniel examined it. It's postmarked 1995. That's before we met. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated 3 weeks before Richard died of his heart attack. A letter I'd never received, or had received and forgotten, buried under decades of other papers. "Dear Eleanor, I'm writing this at 3 a.m. because I can't sleep and I'm finally old enough and maybe wise enough to tell you what I should have said 20 years ago. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too stupid and selfish to recognize what I had. You weren't cold or distant or any of the things I told myself to justify my betrayal. You were exactly what a man should treasure: loyal, kind, strong, devoted. I threw that away for an illusion, for the ego boost of a young woman's attention, for the thrill of something new. And in doing so, I didn't just lose you, I lost the man I could have been. Watching you from a distance these past 20 years has been humbling. You took the worst thing he ever did to you and transformed it into something beautiful. You forgave Stephanie when you had every right to hate her. You built a business, raised 3 incredible children. Yes, I count Thomas, because you raised him more than I ever did. And created a life filled with love and purpose. I, meanwhile, has been married 3 times, searching for something I lost in 1973. It took me 2 decades to realize I wasn't searching for a person. I was searching for the man I was before I made the choices that cost me everything. Patricia left me last year. She said I never really loved her, that I was still chasing ghosts. She was right. I'm not asking for forgiveness. You already gave me more of that than I deserved when you let me see the children, when you didn't turn Thomas against me, when you treated me with basic human dignity despite everything. I'm just saying thank you. Thank you for showing me what strength really looks like. Thank you for being the example our daughters needed of what a woman can be. Thank you for saving Stephanie when I abandoned her. And thank you for proving that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living so well that the past becomes irrelevant. You asked me once, during the divorce, if I ever really loved you. I didn't answer then because I was too much of a coward. But the answer is yes. I loved you as much as a selfish, immature man could love anyone. It just wasn't enough. And that's my failure, not yours. If I could go back to 1973 and make different choices, I would. But since I can't, I'll just say this. That parking receipt you found, best thing that ever happened to you. Worst thing that ever happened to me. Take care of yourself, Eleanor. You always did, even when I didn't. Richard. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Daniel sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. "I am," I said, surprised to find it true. "It's just closure, I guess. I forgave him years ago, but I always wondered if he understood what he threw away. Now I know he did. Does it change anything?" I thought about it. No, but it completes the story somehow. He hurt me terribly, but he paid for it in his own way. That's enough. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the box. I think I'll keep this one, not to dwell on the past, but to remember that everyone's carrying their own regrets. That evening, our whole strange, beautiful family gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd maintained for over 30 years. Daniel carved the roast, mashed the potatoes. Sarah and Jennifer argued about politics while their husbands refereed. Thomas and his fiancée showed us wedding venue photos. At one point, I looked around the table at these people, my husband, my former rival turned best friend, my children and stepchildren, the grandchildren playing in the next room, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What's wrong, Mom?" Sarah asked, noticing my tears. Nothing's wrong, I said, smiling. Everything is exactly right. Later, after everyone had gone home and Daniel was watching television, Stephanie and I sat in the kitchen with our evening tea, another tradition that had lasted decades. I found a letter from Richard today, I told her, showing it to her. She read it silently, then set it down. He understood at the end. Did you ever regret it? Any of it? She considered the question carefully. I regret the affair. I regret the pain I caused you, even though I didn't fully understand it at the time. But I can't regret Thomas. And I can't regret, she gestured around us, this life, this family. Neither can I admitted. Isn't that strange? The worst betrayal of my life led to the best years of my life? Maybe that's the real lesson, she said thoughtfully. It's not about what happens to us. It's about what we choose to do with what happens to us. When did you get so wise? I teased. She learned from the best, she replied, squeezing my hand.